Well, good morning and welcome to the channel. Well, today we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, clarity. For the last month, we've been talking about change, stepping back. Maybe you've retired, maybe you've moved. This time of life brings so many transitions. And it's a time of for some of us, loneliness because we jumped off the hamster wheel and we finally have time alone to think about ourselves, who we are, what we enjoy, how we feel, how we think, what we're willing to accept and what we're no longer willing to accept. And it's all about clarity. So I'm excited to talk to you about it today. And I can't wait to hear what you think about the subject. And have you found clarity these last couple of years? Well, I'll start out by saying I hope you are doing well, feeling well. We're growing an incredibly thoughtful and empathetic community. I learn as much from your comments as I think some of you learn from the videos. It's a great relationship. So come along and let's talk about clarity in these golden years of our life. You know, I've decided that I'm not becoming cold. Maybe people thought I was cold, but I'm becoming clear. And I've been thinking lately, reading all of your comments, that there is a quiet shift that absolutely happens to all of us when we start to slow down, when the kids leave, when we move, when we retire. And it doesn't look dramatic from the outside, but inside it can bring a lot of self-doubt, a lot of questioning, and sometimes we mistake it for becoming cold, uncaring, unfeeling. But I'm not becoming cold. I'm becoming clear. And I bet you are too, because I bet you're finally taking some time for yourself. So there's the old me and the new me, the old you and the new you. If you've generally been a person who feels like you have to over-explain yourself, you try to smooth everything over, bend a little, then a little more, and then a little more, just to keep peace, whether it's with the family, the extended family, a friend group, a social group. I used to think that being liked or popular maybe meant being endlessly fun and endlessly understanding and always being available, tolerating little slights that didn't sit right with me, just so no one would say, oh, wow, Laura, she's such a B blank TCH. I bet a lot of you understand exactly what I mean because, we're raised to be accommodating as women, to be nurturers, to be agreeable. And some of us get really good at it. Even if we didn't like the role, we sort of found ourselves falling into it. But somewhere along the way, maybe we didn't abandon ourselves, but we forgot who we wanted to be and what we wanted to be. I was always the person I've shared that I'm the person you come to for directions, recommendations, options, connections, advice. And I did it because I thought that's why people liked me. That's why people respected me. I was the local community Google. Need an attorney? Just call Laura. Need a doctor recommended? Just call Laura. She'll know someone. And I'm not blaming people for taking advantage of what they didn't know they were taking advantage of, because I was offering it by making myself overly available. And I made it worse. And maybe you have too, because we act happy to do it. And it's hard to say no more and to allow ourselves to see where the cards are going to fall if we change. And I realize now, after lots of clarity, that those weren't true friends. And yes, I think the word friendship is absolutely overused. Social media has taught us to be lazy friends, to put the best of ourselves out there. Well, if we're putting the best of ourselves out there, if we're spending 10 minutes, cropping a picture so our arm isn't in the picture so we don't look like we have big arms, everyone else is doing the same thing. But we're looking at social media and forgetting that these friends aren't way up here while we're way down here. They're just showing us the best of them. And they're not all friends anyway, right? As I said, we overuse the word so much. Many of these people are just acquaintances, past colleagues, nice people, neighbors. So for me, when I finally got off the hamster wheel, I had time alone. It was probably the longest I'd gone alone in years. And I realized, yes, I was tired. I was exhausted. But I wasn't tired physically. I was tired emotionally. I thought when my career ended and being the mayor ended, that all that social stuff would become optional. And I was excited about that until I realized that I honestly don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to do anything. I take care of my family, but I don't have to do anything for anyone else. It was such a tough realization to step back in the quiet and ask myself, do I want to go? Will I enjoy seeing the people that are there? Is there a reason I need to be there to keep a connection? It was this overwhelming feeling that all of a sudden, half of my life, 3/4 of my life was optional. No one was waiting for me to show up. There was no obligation anymore for me to be somewhere at a certain time. And I asked myself, am I going to see people that I want to stay connected to, that I want to maybe get to know better? If I don't show up to this, will I ever even see those people again? And honestly, my patterns were so obvious. I wondered how could I have been so oblivious? I was too busy to take time. So then I started asking myself a question in those quiet moments. What if I just stopped? Stopped over functioning, stopped chasing, stopped explaining, stopped fixing, stopped hosting, stopped showing up, stopped answering every single text and phone call immediately. Now, I'm not a proponent of becoming a hermit. I'm just saying, think about being selective and what that looks like for you. In my case, what happened, and I think it happens to most of us, that, those surface relationships that were never really friends, they just drifted away. I always laugh. The new mayor took half of my friends with him because now he's the mayor. The dynamics with some people absolutely change. And many of those relationships, I should have known they were going to change. I knew they weren't really my friend. They were friend with my title or my position. You may have had a career where you were the boss and people liked you or pretended to like you because you were the boss. It was funny today. I got a text from a old friendly acquaintance. I think I need to watch what I'm saying, who always tries to stir drama. And I found out during this period of clarity that I love being part of the drama. I'm not embarrassed to admit it. And if you get involved, many careers, obviously I was involved in local politics. You usually are someone who relishes the latest tea. But I got the text and I knew that they were stirring the pot and wanted me to comment on someone and something they had done. And all I replied with were the two big googly eyes. And I offered nothing else because I don't want to get pulled into that again, because then I'm feeding the beast. Why shouldn't people think we're a certain way if we don't show them something else? And of course, you have to be prepared for some people to move on. for some of your connections to thin out and for the dynamics to change, not just for you, but for them. There are people who just need oxygen for their drama. And so they're looking around to all their connections to see who will jump on this and get going with me. And I just don't need it anymore. I really don't need it anymore because I now have clarity. I'm still a work in progress, like many of you have shared. I don't know where I'll quite end up, but I have clarity. And then you ask yourself, well, am I expecting too much? Am I being selfish? Maybe they liked the old me and they're not going to like the new me. But what I've learned is that your clarity comes only when you give it time. And it's on us to accept that time. Because if we don't make time for self-reflection, then we're never going to have any clarity, because clarity is being honest with yourself, with your feelings, with your emotions. When you've been a certain way for decades, if you've been soft for decades, I can see where, all those years of volunteering and emotional labor and just doing it because you said you would do it can be so draining to the point that you don't really know who you are. But now we have some silence, we have some alone time, and we get to ask the tough question, and we get to make the tough statement. This just doesn't work for me anymore. I'm not happy. I'm not tired. Don't need the drama. Don't have the bandwidth. I need a more peaceful but fulfilling existence. You may have to walk away for a short time before you come back, because you have to decide where your boundaries are. We don't want to beg for someone to reciprocate. We don't want to have to explain our worth, our value. We don't want to have to audition for friendships. We just want to observe, to notice, to adjust, and to stop trying to convince people to treat us well. And you can only do that if you give yourself time to make that shift that we keep talking about. And I believe that the surprising thing is that the people that truly were your friends, your family, they're going to get it. They're going to respect you for it. I find that the more I've stayed away from certain groups, the more they want to know what I'm up to. And so that's been very nice. I like people thinking about me. But once we get into our 50s and our 60s, our 70s, 80s, our 90s, like my parents, we have the wisdom to recognize our own patterns. And we don't have the same tolerance for chaos, for drama. We understand people a little bit better, and when you're younger, you think, oh, I'll have time. I got plenty of time. I'll make the changes later. But at our age, as I said last week, age is a privilege. We've got to get the most out of it. So now we're saying, is this worth my time? And no, we are not dumping or walking away from meaningful friendships. I've done lots of videos on loyalty, on breadcrumbing, on backstabbers, on mean girls. There are all kinds of people in our life, but they are not all the same, and they don't all get to have the same access to us or deserve the same access to us. And I would be naive to not say there will be pushback, right? When you change, the people who have benefited from the old version of you, they're going to be the ones that notice. And they may even say, wow, you've changed. You seem very distant. You're different. You're not as fun as you used to be. Okay, I was never all that much fun. They get to be right. You get to be different, but you don't owe them an explanation, because you're no longer overextending. You're no longer performative. You're no longer listening to someone who doesn't listen in return, or worse, doesn't even ask you. It can feel threatening to people who are comfortable with the role that you played, because as long as you're doing for them what they've needed you to do for them, maybe for a couple of years, maybe for decades, everything's okay. Growth will always feel uncomfortable for someone, but now we have clarity. I think clarity gives us peace. And so many of you talk about getting to a point where you don't have so much drama. You stop overthinking text. You stop replaying conversations in your head. You stop wondering if you did something wrong every time someone pushes back. You let people show you who they are and you believe them. You know, being alone can be really freeing because it gives us that time to self-reflect, and it teaches us to stop chasing, but we get to notice who stays. You know, I think that one of the hard things that happens, and I want to say this clearly, is we worry that people will think we've become hard and old and cold, but we can still be warm, generous, still be open-hearted, but we're no longer available for the drama and for the gossip. We're not going to, volunteer our time to coding other people's secret messages, right? We're not going to share connections that don't feel mutual. And that's not cold, and that's certainly healthy. And right now, physical, mental, emotional health are super important to us because it makes us feel better about everything. So if you've been feeling this shift that we've been talking about for the last 3 videos, know that you're changing, but you're not turning into someone that other people want to put a label on. Clarity gives us power because we're not going to argue anymore with things that we don't need to argue about. We don't need to rescue the dynamics of a friendship when it was never healthy. We get to adjust. We keep the right people in our lives. Maybe we have to make a few changes to the friendship. We don't let important people slip away because we have time for them. And I think a lot of our friends are going through the same thing. They're looking for that clarity. I brought it up a couple of days ago at lunch with a couple of gals, and it was all we talked about at lunch. So if this resonates with you, if you feel like people are pushing back on your efforts to live these next few decades differently, know you're not alone, but I'd love to hear what you're going through. I always say we're continuing to redefine ourselves. We're just doing it quietly with a lot of self-reflection. It's scary to be alone, especially in the beginning when you've had a rewarding career, when you have your children in the house. Maybe you have grandchildren that live close by. Maybe you've had the same neighbors for 20 or 30 years. Maybe you've worshiped at the same place of worship for decades. Any of those things can be pulled right out from underneath you. A family member moves away, a friend passes away, a neighbor moves. Things can go topsy-turvy in a heartbeat. And you always, if you think about the changes in your life, the transitions, you've always figured out a way to recover. The difference when we get to this stage of our life, I think, is that we feel more alone doing it. We're a lot more cautious and conscious of time and the value of time, so we feel a little rushed. And sometimes it's easier not to change because you don't want to take the time and you don't want to pay the consequences. I'd rather be less busy. I'd rather be off the hamster wheel than back on the hamster wheel, giving my time and my attention to people who I now realize were in my life for a reason, for a season, and hey, that's okay. Sometimes people think you're a better friend to them than you feel, and vice versa. I don't doubt for a second that there are people that have pulled back from us over time. I spent a lot of time when I started this channel talking about the heartbreak of a best friend betraying you, of being ghosted by someone you thought was going to be your ride or die for decades. It hurts. It happens. I think if you are a woman or a man who has put yourself out there socially in any capacity, you've been burnt. So we know what it feels like. And sometimes we overcompensate and we say, well, I'm just going to stick it out no matter what they do to me because I know how bad it feels to lose a friend. Okay. There's losing a friend and running someone off. And there's a whole lot in between. And none of us want to get in arguments anymore with people we care about. Our blood pressure does not need it. None of us want to have that disruption and hurt the feelings of someone who maybe we love very much as a friend during a certain season of our life. So sometimes it's about switching the boundaries, moving the goalposts back a couple of yards so you have a little more time and you have a little more space so that you can give the best of yourself to yourself first. And then the people who you love, the people who are the closest, the people who you feel responsible for. Oh, I love the word clarity. It's like the light bulb went off and someone is home. I'd love to hear from you. I look forward to seeing you next week. I am headed to New Orleans and I have a new gimbal. So we're going to get out in the neighborhood among all the historic homes and hopefully do some video recording. If you have any special requests, please send them my way. Somebody posted in one of the comments, I'll close with this. Who do I want to be? And when you hear that for the first time, you think of a young you, maybe you were 13 or 14 or maybe 10, maybe 12. And your teacher said, who do you want to be when you grow up? Well, we're ready to ask that question again because we've got a lot of good living to do. So ask yourself, who do I want to be? Well, take care. It's great to see you. And I look forward to seeing you next week from New Orleans. Take care. Bye-bye.